We've just seen another Six Nations competition come to a conclusion, and it just did remind me of a few things. It was a lot of brutal action to soften up the opposition, a few casualties along the way, quite a few illegal activities from some surprising people. The rules were somewhat unclear. Well, the referees seemed to make them look unclear, and the outcome was pretty uncertain. So pretty much like the construction contracts in the UK industry, looking back over the last 10 to 15 years. So what I'm hoping to do today is not go backwards, go forwards. What I'm hoping today is just to set out some of the experiences that we've had in the UK about introducing some of the new approaches to procurement, building on some of the issues and principles that Paul has set out. It was interesting to hear the Minister set out his aspirations, and those are probably very similar to the aspirations that ministers might set out in the UK as well. And I suppose the question I was asked at the outset is, how likely are those aspirations going to be delivered, or will they more likely be delivered if you're working in collaboration with your supply chain, or if you've got confrontational relationships with your supply chain? I think that gives an indication of what I'm going to be discussing this morning. So I'm going to look at the background, and you'll be able to see whether that bears any resemblance to the position that you're in Ireland. Look at the drivers for change. We've heard some of that from Paul. What is it that clients want? Look at the procurement principles and the selection procedures, the forms of contract, and how industry can support clients in delivering those projects. So the background, and if we go back, we're going back to the early 1990s, where the UK had very major cost and time overruns. The National Audit Office did a review and found that average cost overruns were 40%, but projects were up to 200% overruns in terms of cost compared to the tender. Most projects were being delivered late. Average was approaching a year. Major quality issues, life cycle performance was not really being addressed. Many disputes and legal costs. Probably on average, certainly in the highways sector, the average time to settle a final account was about 3 years, and when I left the Highways Agency in 2007, the last thing I did was sign off one contract which had been in dispute for 10 years. It was a £20 million contract, £40 million claims, and we shook hands after 10 years with no further money changing hands, and we estimated we spent about £10 million legal fees, and the contractor told us they'd spent £15 million. So what an absolute enormous waste of money, and there's clearly no way to run a business. But also we were seeing supplier failures, unsustainability of businesses, and very large reputational issues associated with for clients and for contractors. At that time, the Department of Transport, as it was, which became the Highways Agency, very poor reputation because of its inability to deliver projects successfully. Those drivers for change, Paul has set out the reports, a whole series of reports during the 90s and the 2000s. And I think the message there is that, government did recognise the extent of the problem, recognised that something needed to be done, and was prepared to commit time and effort to undertake those reviews and to try and put in arrangements like establishing the Office for Government Commerce, which was formed around the year 2000, and developed the Achieving Excellence guidelines. It was willing to put in the effort to try and help industry and clients deliver better value. And more recently, we got the Infrastructure UK, who are developing the National Infrastructure Plan and developing a cost efficiency programme alongside that. But it's an indication, I think, of the need for government to recognise the problem and to recognise that support needs to be given to bring about improvement. And some of those reviews have looked at the causes of problems, that were being experienced in the UK. We looked at this in the Highways Agency, and some of the key causes related to risk, just failing to understand the risk, failing to allocate the risk properly, failing to make it clear where that risk lay, very poor change control, and the financial opportunities that provides to recover monies that might not have been in the tender. Perverse contract incentives. If we go back to the 90s, it was in the interest of contractors to stand around doing nothing, waiting to be told what to do, rather than help to solve problems. Complete lack of supply chain integration, starting with designers. Designers was designing, contractors would be given 2 or 3 weeks notice that they needed to start work and construct the design that had been produced. No input into it, and of course the supply chain would come along later, not being in a position to add any value, but simply to deliver what was required of them. And if that happened to join up, that was just coincidence rather than good planning. We're also seeing a lot of evidence of poor contract management, inability to act in a fair and reasonable way. Engineers under the old ICE5 contracts were meant to be fair, reasonable, independent, very often acted more in the interests of the client than the supply chain, which ultimately was not in the interests of the client, because if the engineers were not taking fair and reasonable decisions, then ultimately it would be for the courts to judge that. The clients would have to pay the costs of a failure of an engineer to act reasonably. And the use of lowest price tendering, which I'll come on to. But when you look at those causes of problems, you can see that most, if not all, are actually due to the strategies and plans of the clients, and it's those strategies and plans that drove the behaviours and the responses to those issues from the supply chain. So I think that a lot of these causes do emanate from the client. Very important that the client demonstrates leadership in terms of setting out what they want to do, how they want the supply chain to behave, and to put in place the mechanics to ensure that those behaviours are supported. Lowest price tendering, I will just spend a couple of minutes on, because I think it's a fundamental problem in terms of trying to achieve best value. I know that within certain economic climates it can appear very attractive. Clients can think they're getting good value, but ultimately, certainly going back to the 90s, I'm absolutely convinced that it was lowest price tendering which was a very fundamental factor to contribute to the problems that were being generated. Some of the causes, some of the issues relating to lowest price tendering, submitting there where tenderers are forced into submitting unrealistically low prices to win the contracts, finding ways of recovering those costs. Clients can attempt to transfer risk to try and get that price certainty. May or may not work. Quite often we find the supply chain finding ways of recovering cost despite the best efforts of the client to transfer that risk. But then when you link it to best value, is it best value simply because contracts have been delivered at that low price? Is that a sustainable position? Does it allow the clients to really understand their cost base? And if you can understand your cost base, you can understand where unnecessary cost is. So in a long-term program of work, I would certainly argue that lowest price tendering is not sustainable. You might take an individual project, and a client who's just a one-off procurer of a single project might be tempted to go down that route, and they may think they've done well, but in terms of the overall interests of the industry, is it a sustainable position, bearing in mind the issues that can develop? And of course, that low price tendering, if you're looking to have a cooperative approach, but you've got that basic confrontation on the commercial issues, can you establish the right relationships which are going to release the innovation, release the opportunities to take forward better value solutions? Of course, you even see it, and it's not just on construction contracts, but I can look back to the 90s where professional services were procured on a lowest price basis. consultancy services procured on lump sums, lowest price bidding. But of course what that is going to produce are designs that are the cheapest design and are not going to be the solutions that are cheapest to build or cheapest to operate in terms of whole life cost. So a quality price approach to take the focus away from price, and as Paul says, absolutely essential that clients do understand the risk of abnormally low prices. Abnormally low provisions do exist within the European regulations for a good reason, because even the European Commission recognised the unfairness in contractors winning jobs on artificially low prices. In jobs I've been involved in, it might be quite rare for prices to be rejected because they're abnormally low, but when I was at the Highways Agency, we did reject at least 2 bids on that basis, and I know they've rejected one quite recently for one of their maintenance contracts. On Crossrail, where I've been head of procurement, the Underground Railway across London, two major contracts there involved rejecting abnormally low bids. And again, it sent a clear message to the industry that the client was looking for sustainable prices. It wanted to focus on quality. And so client does need to be prepared to take those hard decisions in order to achieve sustainable positions. So what is it that clients want? Well, there's a mixed bunch of clients out there, and they probably all want different things. And we've heard about price and time certainty, and I know that's a key focus within your industry. Price and time certainty is clearly good. It helps with investment decisions. It helps with budget planning. What you want to be sure of as well, however, is that price certainty is offering certainty of value for money as well, and it's offering sustainability of your supply chain. So that involves effective risk management. That's obviously linked to price certainty, but you want the relationships where risks are allocated fairly. Why would you allocate risks unfairly? So effective risk management by the party best placed to manage those risks. Clearly, clients want good health and safety and environmental performance. And again, the contracts need to be set up in a way that ensure that parties are incentivised to support clients in the delivery of those objectives. Best value, I think you can only achieve best value if you understand your costs and you can demonstrate continual improvement. When you're looking at the benchmarking that Paul was describing, best value might be best value one day, but best value is only achieved if you get that continual improvement. And within that, certainly for clients who are delivering long-term programs of work, you need a sustainable supply chain. Clients aren't going to deliver anything if their best suppliers are going elsewhere or are going out of business. And of course, clients do want a good reputation, and a good reputation comes by working with the supply chain to achieve those successful results. And of course, that good reputation ultimately leads to investment decision makers being willing to pass more funds across to continue to take forward major projects, because those investment decision makers will know that those projects are in safe hands. So I think all of those things are going to be important. And of course, what the customer really needs, and again, I think this is building on the points that Paul was making in terms of where the costs are, and this is based on work done by Constructing Excellence organisation in London. It's highlighting the different costs associated with the different stages of a building or a piece of infrastructure. I think the actual unit costs here are related to a typical building. So where you may spend 0.1 of a unit on the design and the construction costs 1, the operation and maintenance associated with that building or piece of infrastructure is likely to cost 5 over the whole life. But then the business cost, particularly when you think about a building, what's it going to cost the building? What's it going to cost the business to run its business within that building is 200. But then what is the value of the business that business is producing? Is many folds, many times greater than the cost of construction and the operation and maintenance. So clearly, I think this illustrates that you should be willing to spend that a little bit more on design to get the construction right, and within the construction you should be considering the operation and maintenance, how you can reduce the operational and maintenance costs. and how that can support more efficient business delivery and more successful outcomes. And when we talk about early contractor involvement, initially we were looking at how the construction providers might work with the designers to produce more effective and better value designs. But of course it's not just the contractors, it's also involving operators and maintainers, and it's also involving the ultimate end user in terms of looking at the solutions to see how those decisions taken at an early stage can influence the value over the whole life of the project. So when I talk about early contractor involvement in a minute, it's not just contractor, it's about the whole supply chain, it's about operational involvement. All of those who are going to be involved in the building or the infrastructure can contribute to that better value development of the solutions at the outset. So the new approach to procurement that was developed in response to all those problems and those issues, and certainly something that we took forward at the Highways Agency, and subsequently we've tried to adopt this in the rail projects that I've been involved in as well. And if I thought it was a challenge trying to change the culture in the highway sector, then it was an even greater challenge to work with contractors and clients in the rail sector. But we are seeing a change. I think in the UK, Network Rail in the past has been described as a difficult client. And I think even there we are seeing, Sir David Higgins, who was at the Olympics, has gone across as chairman. And I think that's been important in changing the culture within Network Rail organisation, but even within Network Rail, seen as that potentially bad client. We're seeing some examples of some very innovative approaches to how collaboration may get taken forward. So the key principles that we're seeing in the United Kingdom from the leading clients, those who are doing successfully, it's about the early creation of integrated teams, and there's a number of different ways of doing that. It's that collaborative working, and we hear a number of different terms used for that. It's partnerships, collaboration, alliances, and there can be quite a bit of confusion, and some of those terms have attracted some poor publicity because of particular aspects of them. But the principle of working together to create better value solutions and to manage risks effectively is the thrust of collaborative working. A fair allocation of risk. Yes, it can be attractive to try and transfer all risk, but if that risk is then properly priced for within the tenders, then it's unlikely that clients are going to get good value. Yes, as we've discussed, if you combine that with lowest price tendering, then contractors may take risks with risks, but is that going to be sustainable in the long term? Is that what a client really wants? Selection of suppliers based on best value, a quality price approach, looking to try and select the best team who's going to work with a client to develop an optimal solution and to deliver it efficiently. That's ultimately what we've been trying to achieve. Incentives within the contract for best value delivery. Do all of the clauses within the contract really incentivise the right behaviours? Are there precise incentives aligned with the client's business objectives? Quite often, if they are there, it's more by coincidence rather than by the client carefully planning that alignment. And is there the performance measurement, not just of cost and time, but of how the relationships are working to achieve the continual improvement that the client will be looking for? So the procurement strategies that have developed, yes, we still see some construction-only contracts, mainly probably in local authorities. Clearly that lacks the integration that we're looking for under the new approach. Yes, design and build, or build and design, as we saw on some of Paul's examples. Early contractor involvement, whereby the contractor is appointed much earlier, and that is a form of design and build. And of course, the big issues associated with that are how you select contractors at an early stage before the end solution is fully known. So how does pricing work within that? And again, that could be the subject of a fairly lengthy conference, so I won't touch on that. I'll just raise the issue. The benefits of ECI, well, we've been using ECI for over 10 years. It's not just about the contractor improving buildability, looking at what the designers produced to see whether it's capable of being built. The benefits of ECI flow from getting the relationship in place with the contractor at an early stage so that the contractor understands what the client is looking for, have a much greater understanding of stakeholder requirements, a much better understanding of the risk, and they can work with the client to manage out risk. They can bring in innovation. There is time to allow that innovation to be developed, and they can bring in their greater skills for cost estimating, budgeting, and of course they can plan the resources if they're appointed 2 years or so before the construction. Then they're able to look at the skills requirements and get those skills in place. And ultimately, certainly for the Highways Agency, that approach has resulted in much greater certainty, both time, cost, and they are also able to get clarity and transparency of cost, which is driving continual improvement. The forms of contract are important in supporting the new approach. Yes, the standard forms of contract, important that industry can get that consistency, can understand the risks, and they're not seeing a multitude of bespoke contracts. The arrangements need to support the desired relationships with that fair allocation of risks, and again, incentives aligned with objectives within those contracts. And very important that the client has the capability to manage those contracts in the way that they've been set up. I know that in Ireland you're using the GCC, and I think your president set out at the beginning some of the issues relating to that. I mean, it's interesting that the contract does at clause 4.1 set out the desired reciprocal cooperation between the employer and the contractor. But then you look at other aspects of the contract and you think, well, okay, the clients are looking for cooperation, but really is the rest of the contract set up in a way that is delivering cooperation? And I'm not going to answer all these questions, but these are questions that need to be looked at in terms of the review of the contracts that are going to be coming up. Does the contract contain a fair allocation of risk? Is the supply chain able to manage the risk that's being transferred to it? And there's issues that can be looked at there in terms of how the tender price requires contractors to make certain assumptions. The contract is awarded on that basis, but then if those assumptions are wrong, and of course the contractor has no opportunity to manage those changes, but they have to carry the risk of that information being wrong. Is that fair? I would argue that there are other ways of managing that risk in a more equitable way. Are there unreasonable requirements within the contract? And again, we can look at the association of those requirements in the contract with the use of lowest price tendering and some of the things that were described in relation to delayed provisions, programme contingency and retention money. Are those aspects being delivered in a reasonable way that are going to give clients value for money? And again, I would suggest there are some potential improvements that can be made to ensure that the contractors can understand what it is that needs to be incorporated into the tender prices and then are effectively managed within the contract. And are we getting reasonable administration or consistent administration of the contracts across the sector? And again, some of the examples that I've seen, clearly there are some inconsistencies in how clients are managing contracts, which again result in contractors having to suffer because the reasonable expectation of the employer's obligations of the contracts are not, or apparently not always being fulfilled. And so does contract support the desired outcomes? In the short term, clients may be able to say, yes, we're getting consistency, certainty of price. Because we're getting certainty of price, we're getting good value, but is that a sustainable position into the long term? I suggest that possibly not. And when it comes down to whether that contract is supporting the best competition, the strongest competition, are the contractors putting forward the best teams? Are they putting in the strongest proposals that they can? And that's the risk that clients face if they're not putting forward contracts that appear attractive. In the United Kingdom, we are largely using the NEC3 contract. Just a couple more slides, Chairman, because we're getting concerned on the time. We're using the NEC3. I should declare an interest because I'm chairman of the NEC3 users group. I'm not here to promote the use of the NEC3, but it is a contract that is being widely used across the UK and is growing in its use on the international market as well. Similar to the GCC contract, it sets out that it is intended to operate in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. But then the provisions within the contract, I think, better support that collaborative approach than possibly the GCC. Now, if clients are working collaboratively within the industry and with their suppliers, what is it that the industry can do in return if they're being treated fair and reasonably? I would argue if they're not being treated fair and reasonably, then these sorts of outcomes are pretty unlikely. But if you can build up those relationships, then the sorts of things that can be delivered, it's the innovation, the improvement, the efficiencies, incentives for the supply chain to share in some of those savings. You can get the cost transparency, the benchmarking to help clients understand better what their costs are and how they can achieve the sorts of targets that we've heard about from Paul. You can achieve that effective risk management by the parties working together, even though it might not be their particular problem, but it's clearly in their interest to help other parties manage those risks effectively. We can see skills investment. Just last week, the UK had an apprentices week, and we saw the Prime Minister and the Mayor for London and others visiting projects like Crossrail, where there have been major successes in getting further apprentices on board and local job opportunities being created. The sustainability objectives, which you've heard about from the Minister, much more likely that they'll be delivered in collaborative type relationships between the supply chain and clients. And the supply chain can come together to share those lessons of improvement, not keeping the ideas that they have to themselves, but sharing them across the whole of industry to the benefit of the whole of the industry, the economy, and the clients. And ultimately, all of that will feed through to the reputation not only of the client, but to the supply chain. So in the UK, I think the conclusions that I would draw about successful delivery, the experience we found is it does require a collaborative culture. It requires that fair allocation of risk supported by reasonable contract terms, a sustainable contract price, which has been delivered through best value tendering and not lowest price tendering, robust documents, putting the effort into the documents to avoid change, incentives that are aligned across the whole supply chain, designers, contractors, first, second, third tier suppliers, and robust contract management. So I think those are the main conclusions I would draw, and I suppose the question I would leave with you is ultimately, should clients worry about the health of their supply chain? Now, my answer would be a very categoric yes, because without that sustainable supply chain, clients won't be delivering their long-term investment programs in a way that deliver best value. And with that, Chairman, apologies for running over, but thank you very much.